Shabbat shalom. I notice we're a little light this morning, but I presume that's because people are down at the No Kings protest, or planning on going down to the No Kings protest. So please know that my heart in particular goes with you. And I would be there myself, but it is Rabbi Perlo's 8th birthday today. And so some things deserve precedence no matter what. Okay. This is Twain. After Adam was expelled from Eden, children were born to him, and when they achieved the age of inquiry, they said, "Father, take thou a pen and write of the marvels and the loveliness of the garden, and of the delight and the charm and the splendor and the bewitchment of the enchanted life which thou and our mother Eve did lead there, that we may read it. And so shall it may come to pass that we shall also enjoy it, albeit we see it not, save only through thine eyes and thy memory." And Adam answered, saying, "Lo, wait ye but a little time, and I will do it." But Adam procrastinated. For behold, men may be made, each after his own kind, and Adam was of the kind which put off not until the morrow that which may be done today. But do it even put off till next week, yea, even until the middle thereof, and not do it then, nevertheless, but again neglect it. Therefore, whosoever is without guile, let him lie down with the lion in the land, and be not ashamed of his nakedness. For they shall put a ring upon his hand and shoes upon his feet, and all that was his father shall be his, and also his mother and his sister, and likewise the mote that is in his brother's eyes. For it is easier for a rich man to go through the eye of a camel than for another man to break the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Twain was obsessed with the stories of Genesis, and he wrote about them over and over and over again throughout the course of his life. Of course, he's Mark Twain, so he can't write about it without laughing. And one of the things I wanted to sort of explore is, why is it so many people come back again and again and again to the stories of the first book of the Torah? I was out there with Sherry, and we were sort of talking, and she's teaching, sorry to incorporate you into this, but she's teaching a great books class, American novel, great American novel, class. And at least 2 of the books have biblical references in their title. But I was thinking actually as well about some of my favorite American novels, and so many of them somehow or another harken back to here and now, this first parsha in the story. The first 6 chapters of the Torah that we read in 1 week. East of Eden comes to mind, and on and on and on. And so I just sort of wanted to speak with you, to talk with you a little bit about what is it about these stories that are so meaningful and powerful? Why is it that they keep capturing us? Because if you look at the stories themselves, they are, well, kind of a mess. Right. So just answer me this question. How many creation stories are there? There's 1, right? Right. There's 2, right? Right. Yeah. So what kind of Bible has 2 creation stories? No, this one, David says, is a good one. But seriously, think about it for a second. What kind of Bible has 2 creation stories? What an odd thing to do. What editor let that happen? Because if you think about it, what is the point of having creation stories that quite obviously diverge from one another? The truth is, after all these years, I'm not even sure if I know the answer, other than that it's clear to me that whoever knitted this part of the Bible together, and it's pretty clear that they are sort of edited together in a way that it ever will look at it, basically looked at the 2 stories and say, I can't get rid of one of these. They're just too good. But in my mind, actually realizing that there are 2 creation stories opens up the possibility for me that there are more than 2 creation stories. And one of the things that I wanted to argue, yes, I foreshadowed it before, is that there are really 3 or even 4 creation stories. And I would argue that the second creation story, I'm going to be jumping all over the Chumash, and you know how difficult it is to navigate this Chumash. So I'm going to try to do this without page numbers, but just through the knowledge that you already know, which is to say there was this garden, and the garden was full of good things to eat. And the first human beings, Adam v'Chava, were sort of frolicking in this garden. And right in the middle of the garden was planted what? A tree. And what was this tree? Who said it was an apple tree, by the way? Steve, why'd you say it was an apple tree? I don't mean to put you on the spot, although I realize that I am, but it's, Ed, who thinks of it as an apple tree? King James did think of it as an apple tree because that's what they had, right? So, but the truth is we have no idea what the fruit is on this tree. Classically, it was a pomegranate, but the story itself tells us not. And I once heard the daughter of a teacher of mine say it was every fruit that was on the tree. It was the fruit tree. So we don't know what the fruit of this tree is, and it's in the middle of the garden. And the snake, who is apparently quite crafty, comes up to the woman, and what does he say about that? He says, "Did you know that there's this tree?" And the woman says, "This tree, it is like it's delectable and it's delightful and it's really beautiful looking, but we can't eat of it lest we'll die." What's wrong with this picture, as it were? Well, how do you know what it tastes like is one of them. Lots of things wrong with this picture, I think. Why plant a fakakta tree if you don't want someone to eat from it? Seriously, like you put the most tasty tree in the middle of the garden and you put a sign on it saying, "Don't eat the tree." Like it's like reverse psychology that I use to get my kids to eat food that they don't want to eat, right? I'm like, "No, you won't like it. It's terrible. It's made of alligator." It's like what better way could you possibly signal that you wanted someone to eat from that tree than to make it look good and then declare it off limits? Other problems with this particular story? Okay, so there's a snake that talks. That's true. Yeah, over there, yeah. The snake has legs in this story, yeah? So evolutionarily, apparently, this is what happened to snakes at some point. But I hear what you're saying. It's like, what's going on with the? Yeah, I love it. But what really bothers me about this story is that God lies about the tree. Right? What's one of the first things that God says to the human beings is a lie, which is if you eat of this fruit, you'll die. You won't die if you eat of this fruit. You will live if you eat of this fruit. Right? Later on, by the way, the story concocts another tree, the tree of life, and God says we have to get them out of the garden before they eat the tree of life from the tree of life. Tree of life isn't mentioned before. And why do we need to get them out of the garden? Because if they eat the tree of life, not just that they won't die, they'll be like us, which, by the way, why is God talking in the first person plural? Unclear. Right? But they'll be like us, which is to say, like, human beings will become gods. We have to get them out of this garden. And so they're expelled from the garden. And I would say that that is a third creation story. Because if you think about the difference between people who know how to think between the difference between good and bad, right and wrong, and people who don't, and sort of a paradise and Elysium and the real world, well, that's a story of how we came to be too. Noah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to. Does it say Etz HaChaim? Excuse me, I was wrong. Noah's correct, I was wrong. Oh, there's a second way that I'm wrong. Okay. But where does it say in the text that this is? It says if you'll eat from the tree, you'll die, but it doesn't say that in the Torah, does it? That's when their life becomes hard, but death is not. It doesn't. I don't know of anywhere in the literal text of the Torah that it says that death is introduced after they eat of the tree of life and death. Sarah? Yeah. Yes. Okay, I love Milton, but it's not in the purview of things that I'm required to know. No,
But it makes me think that death is part of.
yeah. Well, okay, yeah. Izzy.
So I think that so when they eat the fruit, it will lead to them the fruit of knowledge. It would lead to them dying, because you learn everything except maybe what it is to die, and then there's nothing really left to do with your life. So you have to experience.
Izzy, say it again. Say it again so I understand. I think you're saying something important.
So if you know everything possible to know except maybe what it is to die, then your only purpose would to be to learn the one thing that you don't.
Whoa.
Which is a little grimly to die.
That was cool. I'm feeling very good right now because I've gotten Adat Shalom members now to defend God, which makes me feel, yes, what, Noah?
If you look at Bereshit Gimel, this is what I was trying to refer to. It says that God says, now man, because they ate from the tree of knowledge, is one of them to know between good and bad. And now that he knows that, he may take his hand and eat from the tree of life and then will live forever. And therefore, Vayeshalcheu Adonai Elohim miGan Eden. And therefore he's thrown away from Gan Eden, which means he's becoming mortal and he will die. So
no, that's not a necessary. I mean, I agree with you that it's true, but that doesn't mean that he became mortal when he ate from the tree. It's a fine interpretation. I'm just saying, in the pshat of the text, it's not clear that eating of the tree necessarily means that they became mortal. In fact, it's not clear that they understood the difference between life and death at those times.
Right. So eating from the tree is going to make them smart enough to eat from the tree of life, and then they will become immortal.
Yes.
And so that's what God didn't want. But it's not. I don't think God lied. That's all.
You know what? Fine. Mim, you want to say something? Yeah.
But how come when God says don't eat from the tree of knowledge, it doesn't also say, nor should you eat from the tree of life?
That is an excellent question for which I have no answer. I was wondering that as well. Yeah.
And yet, when he says, if you eat from the tree of knowledge, you will die, it needn't mean right away. That's where everyone infers that they're immortal until such time as they eat of the tree of knowledge.
So while I appreciate all three of these very vociferous objections to my statement, if I said to my kids, don't eat that because you'll die, it generally means that the eating of it is the proximate cause of it. Like the thing that's not missing here is that, like, generally don't eat it because it'll kill you, or you'll die if you eat it, usually means right then and there.
Well, it's not describing a usual situation.
You know what I'm going to do from now on? I'm going to argue for atheism, lack of enjoyment of services, and then everything's going to be even better than it already is here. We're going to have a whole community of believers just to spite me. It's fantastic. Okay. What? So the point being that I think that I'm just so taken by how rabbinic you all were. No, God didn't lie. It never happened. It didn't exist. So that, I think, is at least the third moment of creation, which is to say, like, what differentiates us between the beasts of the field? On some level, this knowledge of good and evil. Long discussion, by the way, of what it means, this knowledge of good and evil, or good and bad, or as it says in the Torah. But I also want to argue that there's a fourth story, and that fourth story is a really difficult story. And I want to argue that the fourth creation story is the story of Cain and Abel. So remember that story is really the last major narrative that rounds out this particular parsha. And what's crazy about the story is it doesn't even try on some level to pretend that there's nobody else on the planet at the time, as one would be led to believe by the, what do you want to call it, the chronology of the Genesis story. The reason I know this is because when Cain is punished, one of the first things he does is get married. I don't know what commentary a person can make about that, but nonetheless, like, it's clear he actually leaves his area, right? He's navanad, he's a wandering person, but he gets married, and it's not at all clear who he gets married to or where this other person came from to get married. And so there's like such a huge discontinuity in the story, it's very hard not to pay attention to what's going on here. But why is it that I would argue that this last story is also a creation story? Any thoughts? It's not a very nice story. Hold on, did someone did we lose the mic or something? Harriet, yeah.
This is a stretch. This is a stretch. But if he gets married, will he then have children?
He does have children. No, he has a number of children, yeah.
That's creation and creating life.
Okay. Sarah, what else would love to, yeah.
I'll be fast. If the third creation story is sort of like us becoming human, the leaving the...
Yeah.
This one is the story of us becoming... I'm going to use the word sin because I don't have another word, but it more so from eating from the tree. It is when violence and all the problematic things that make us human enter the world.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's right. There's a hand over here, yeah. Ira?
This coming back to the third story, I think that it's not necessarily that we become mortal. It's before the tree of knowledge, we do not understand that we can die. Therefore, like an animal, when like a sheep, just before the axe is raised, you're still looking up at the person who's about to kill you and think, what's happening?
Thank you for that illuminating and yet terrifying explanation. Appreciate that. It was very well put. Yeah.
Is about the fourth
Yeah.
part? Or the third?
Go ahead.
I think he wants
Yeah.
to stay on the fourth.
It's okay. No, it's okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on the third part,
Yeah.
if they become human when they leave the Garden of Eden, that says they aren't human when they're in the Garden of Eden. If they're created on a different day than animals, that's saying they aren't human or animals. Wouldn't that put them at the same level of God as God?
Well,
Thank you.
that's a really good question. Yeah. Yes, David.
I love it that the next generation is asking the best questions.
Yeah.
And Yasha Koach, you guys, really good. It occurred to me that we talk about the Torah as Eitz Chaim. The Torah is the tree of life. And so God doesn't lie. God says you're going to die. So there must be tshuva in the world, right? There must be, because they must have said, okay, we repent, we're sorry, we did the wrong thing, and God said, okay, you're not going to die. But they still can't eat the tree of life because we haven't gotten to the second book yet. We aren't going to get the tree of life until after the Exodus. So there's got to be, we have a lot more chapters to go before we get to the Eitz Chaim. That's why he's telling them, hold off, guys.
I appreciate this beautiful midrash. Having said that, none of that is in the Pshat. And also there's a number of midrashim that talk about the Torah being created. So the world being created from the Torah, right? The rabbis extend the Torah backwards. If we're playing in the land of midrash, let's play.
That's why it's in the middle of the garden, because it was the first thing, right?
So, But I think when it comes to this fourth story, one of the things that we're going to get, at the very least, is an understanding of how the Torah is going to speak to us from now on. The Torah in this is a very unusual religious book because people are almost always invariably presented in their worst light, not in their best light. If you read the Torah without commentary, it's very sort of hard to understand why this is a spiritual book. You with me so far? Right? Look, when it comes to the first human beings and they ate from the tree, just so you know, there's like the Christian theology fixes on the idea of original sin and takes it over. And at that point in time in Jewish history, what's sort of fascinating is that we abandon it, but it did exist in Jewish thinking beforehand. What's fascinating by it is that, especially the Hasidic commentaries, and will tell you that the quote-unquote sin that happened in the Garden of Eden was fixed when we got the Torah and built the Mishkan, the tabernacle. That was its resolution, and we didn't really have to worry about it anymore. What's the sin that dominates Jewish thinking, though? Historical Jewish sin that dominates Jewish thinking? The golden calf. Yeah. So that's the one that really, like, we can't really figure out and is sort of still with us in that kind of a way. Anywho, I think what I'm trying to say is that what the first parsha of Genesis gives us is actually not a scientific rendering of the creation of the heavens and earth, but 4 creation stories. And what's amazing about each of those creation stories is that you can understand those stories from 4 different perspectives. Right, on some level, the first creation story is the creation story from the perspective mostly of God. And so in certain ways is the second one, but it's a very human-centric story. By the third one, we're really looking at it through humans' eyes. And by the fourth one, we're looking at it through human eyes, not in a relationship with God, but in a relationship to each other. And so, not to get too existentialist about this, but one of the ways to understand how the book of Genesis is trying to talk to us is by these 4 different vantage points about how the world as we understand it came to be. And then next week, we'll get into the most psychologically dynamic, least realistic story in the Torah, which is the story of Noah's Ark. So one of the things that I think is sort of worth thinking about and asking yourself here is, why does God love stories so much? Why not just keep it simple? Why complicate the whole matter? Why 4 different narratives, none of which, by the way, that intersect particularly well with one another? And what is the Torah trying to tell us about what it is and how it's going to teach us about humanity? Shabbat shalom.